A lot of talk around the election, right? Now we know who the president's going to be. We know the administration's going to come through. And everybody's asking, what does that mean for fertilizer? And a lot of folks have come and said, this is great for farmers. You know, they're going to rescind all this stuff. He's really for the American ag. He's going to get rid of this stuff, lower our prices. But the problem is Trump leans into his tariffs. He's got a history of using them. I'm not saying he's going to continue that, but if you think about it, all the tariffs against Chinese fertilizer imports, that 25% tariff came from the Trump administration. So I'm a little more nervous we might see more tariffs than not. And right now, when it comes to, say, Russia, we have got tariffs on their phosphate, but not on potash, not on nitrogen. And I am very hopeful Trump will be able to leverage his relationship with Putin to get it so that they get along a little bit better. Maybe they can find some situation where they are willing to work with each other, right? We don't have the fighting going on. But if they start to get into a little bit of an ego, button heads, and Trump starts to pull out these tariffs, well, now we've lost another supplier of potash. Now we've lost another supplier of of nitrogen. That's the worry. He likes to use these tariffs as a tool. We'll see if he does that on fertilizer.
That's going to really almost put fertilizer application almost too expensive for an awful lot of farmers.
It's going to be tough. Fortunately, potash is already very well priced. A lot of supply out there. Thank goodness we have Canada to our north. More than enough product up that direction. On the nitrogen side, fortunately, there's a lot of nitrogen produced around the world. The one that worries me is UAN. If he puts tariffs on Russia UAN, there's not a lot of those tons around the world. That removes a competitor from the U.S. marketplace.
As far as supplies right now, how are we doing on supplies for either late fall application or early spring application?
So far for fall, we're doing well. But I would say it's more because we haven't had a fall run yet. We're November 14th, and we have barely turned a wheel across most of the corn states. The only places I've heard of any sort of application has been more the northern plains. They've been dry enough to get out to the fields, but your main target area for the fall has barely done anything. I know here in Kansas City, we just had another big rain yesterday. More rain in the forecast Sunday, Monday. If we get one more event between now and Thanksgiving, we have to really have a conversation of, are we going to have a fall application? Maybe that puts prices a little bit lower in the wintertime, but the amount of demand we're going to have to cover in the springtime is, I don't want to say we can't do it, but it's going to be very, very difficult.
But if farmers are really looking at saving money, they may be able to look at what they've got in the ground and in the bank right now for that before they have to pay for any more phosphate.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to your relationship with your retailer. Have those conversations. You're absolutely right. Phosphate prices are high versus historical prices. They're high versus grain prices. It doesn't matter how you cut it. Phosphate is high price. So on the one hand, we want to do these soil samples. We want to look and see where we need it. And if the soil is calling for it, it probably makes sense that we need to go ahead and replenish that because we need to maximize our bushels next year. We can't leave phosphate deficient and have a lower yield. That's cutting our nose off to spite our face. But if the soil samples come back and say, listen, you're good on phosphate, that's a cut we can make. That's an input cost we can lower because we're doing a little bit more checking to see we're putting where it needs to go, when it needs to go. A very conservative, skittish demand market out there. We got spoiled as an industry. The last several years, grain prices were high, farm economics were okay. I'm not going to say they were great, but they were okay. And everybody kind of got spoiled because everybody was stepping forward early to buy the product. There's no real question of it. This time, everybody is much more conservative. They're dragging their feet. They don't want to pull the trigger too early. And the problem with that is we're waiting until the absolute last minute to come in and say, we need this, we need that. So that just-in-time demand, sometimes that can affect the market downside. But if it waits until the absolute last minute before demand is ready to roll, now your just-in-time logistics start to play a part.
Has the phosphate mines in Florida, have they recovered? Have we lost really very much from Hurricane Milton?
The combination of Helene and Milton, we think we lost between 200,000 and 300,000 tons of production. There was no real major damage from what we had heard. Everybody kind of got through okay, but the problem is you've got to let your workers go home, clean up their properties, do that sort of stuff, and then you got to think about the water coming back, the electricity coming back. So there's a little bit of production loss, but it was more because the workers need to be at home with their family, their friends, their neighbors. But yeah, for Milton, People don't realize this. If that storm had been 35 miles north, Tampa Bay is dealing with 10 to 15 foot storm surge, devastating to the region. We were literally 35 miles away from having a completely different conversation today.